the UP, you don't have to look far to find something interesting. If you take a closer look, you might find things you didn't know were there.
If you look closely here, there's another amazing animal called a fairy shrimp.
And we'll finish up our tanning project.
Take it outside, give it a shake.
Stick around, it's Monday night and time for discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone. Forests thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak. Surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields. Call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill. The eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
A while back, I met up with ecologist Ryan Rutherford and learned a lot about lichens. I was back with Ryan at the end of April, this time for a look in the water.
So we're in a swale wetland here right near Lake Superior, and this was created as the lake levels were gradually receding. So what we have here is we'll have long strings of wetland that are long and narrow, and then you'll get a ridge like the ridge behind us and this way too, and there's a series of 5 of them. And I put minnow traps in there to see what we can get. So if you put them in the right spot, you try to put them along a corridor, maybe along a dead log where you get things moving around. And it's just a way to see what's there. It's a good way to monitor our local environments. And here we have something. This is a predaceous diving beetle. These are among the top predators in these ephemeral pond ecosystems. So they can fly around pond to pond. They have the ability to fly, and they'll feed on salamanders and small frogs. I've even seen them eat fish. They have a long narrow beak that they use to pierce them, and they can. So sometimes when we get these in our traps, they'll actually consume the amphibians and the small fish they get trapped in there. They're pretty voracious predators. We don't give insects enough credit for being stealthy and effective predators, but they really are. They're some of the top predators in these pond ecosystems. Might just look like a stick to most folks, but this is actually a insect called a water scorpion. And it's a kleptoparasite. They steal food from other animals. You can see they have long front legs, kind of like a mantis. He'll use those to grab the prey and then pierce them with his sharp beak and then suck out the juices. Pretty neat animal, and just something you're not going to see unless you're trapping or you're dip netting. Another neat thing about the water scorpion too is they can actually take in water through their rear end. You see this big structure coming out of their rear end. They'll stick that up in the water, and they can live in mucky sediments that don't contain any oxygen. Here's another predator here. This is a dragonfly nymph. It's one of our pond dragonflies. You can see he's got his little wing buds on the back. And these have a really unique way of feeding. On the bottom side of the mouth, they have the structure called a labium this actually shoots out. So he'll shoot that structure out and grab the prey and then bring it right back to the mouth. It's a really unique way of feeding. And they also shoot water out of their rear end too. That's how they scoot around in the water real quick. They're mostly sit and wait predators. They're really well camouflaged. They'll just hang out in the vegetation, and when a small bug comes along, like a mosquito, this is an excellent predator. So right here we have a communal egg dump. So these are wood frog eggs, and they tend to lay all of their eggs in the same part of the pond. So they pick the sunniest part of the pond, and the females will basically all lay the eggs in the same area. They look like caviar. They actually feel really nice in the hand. So this is our first frog species to finish breeding. They'll start just as the spring peepers do, but after about 2 weeks, they're done. So at this site, these guys are pretty much done laying eggs, and these will hatch pretty soon. Within the next couple of weeks, they'll hatch, and then they'll probably emerge depending on the weather this year, late June to early August, depending on conditions. These are the eggs of the spotted salamander, one of our very first to come here and breed. So they'll lay the egg mass, and they'll deposit this jelly, and then as they lay it, the jelly will expand and take on water, so they end up becoming a lot larger than they originally were. You can see the little individual embryos. You can see an algae start to grow on the embryos. That's a kind of algae called salamander algae. They can withstand being out of the water for several days at a time. So this gelatinous coating around them keeps the embryos nice and moist. I've seen ponds that have dried up really early in the springtime and then had no water there for a week or more, and then they finally got rain, and they hatched and turned out just fine. So it's a pretty nice adaptation to changing conditions. That's where that algae starts to grow, and it can grow right inside of that jelly, and it provides oxygen for the growing embryos, and the algae get a place to reside during the process too. So it's thought to be a symbiotic partnership between the two species. When looking for salamander nests, I find these little tubers from bugleweed, Lycopus uniflorus, and they have quite a nice taste, kind of like a water chestnut. So a little bonus that you might get when you're looking for salamanders. So this is a water boatman. You can see how he gets his name. He has those legs that are kind of paddle-like. Another common pond inhabitant. And here is another kind of dragonfly larva. This is one of our darners. You recognize it by its really long abdomen. You can see that labium there. There's that labium structure that it uses to grab its prey. They have these large eyes too, so they're very visual foragers, hunters. Got a real alien-like face. So these are our largest kind of dragonfly, the darner. This is kind of a small nymph for this particular kind, but he'll probably emerge late in summer. So our dragonflies, they spend most of their lives as nymphs. They can be in the nymph stage for several years. And the adult stage doesn't last long at all. It's months. In some species, it's just a few weeks. So we think as dragonflies as animals that spend their time up in the air foraging for smaller insects, but really they're aquatic animals that spend very little of their lives flying around as we see them. We rarely get to see them how they spend the majority of their time. If you look closely here, there's another amazing animal called a fairy shrimp. You can see their red gills undulating through the water there. These are another species, a small crustacean that is also specialized at living in these ephemeral ponds. The eggs will stay there throughout the dry part of the season, and they'll hatch early on in springtime in large abundances, and they're just feeding on detritus, dead plant material, but they're a pretty amazing animal that you only find in this ephemeral pond habitat. And these guys, they only come out in spring. They last for a few weeks. If you come here later on in May, they'll probably be all gone. They'll go through their cycle and lay their eggs and be out of the system. Yeah, one thing I just noticed here, which is pretty amazing, is all these little green things are little seedlings. This is a plant called a willow herb or epilobium, and there are hundreds and hundreds of them just starting off, growing on these little stalks. So these would have been last year's seed pods, and the seeds never left the pods, and now they're sprouting. You can see the roots down here on the bottom, pretty amazing. So this is probably our least favorite animal here in the EP. This is a mosquito larva, and they're actually here in some abundance in this pond. And the eggs will hatch pretty much as soon as the ice leaves. But the good news is a lot of these salamanders in here will use them for food. All right, so we got a nice sunny spot here, and the mosquitoes are really enjoying this. Actually, so like a lot of the animals in these ephemeral ponds, they'll kind of gravitate towards the warmest part of the pond. We kind of have a nice south-facing opening here. And you can see it's just loaded with these mosquito larvae. There's some fairy shrimp in there too, but the mosquito larvae are really abundant. Probably about mid-May they'll come out, so we still have a couple weeks of what I like to call the honeymoon period of the year, when you can go out and still enjoy warm temperatures and not have mosquitoes. But things will change. So these are wood frogs, one of our earliest breeders. They start at the same time that spring peepers do. They have kind of a weird call, so they kind of sound like quacking ducks, like a and they call more during the day, so they call it the warmest time of the day. And they can be quite beautiful. You can see here just a little bit of the variation. Sometimes they'll have a white stripe going down the back, but this nice reddish russet color is pretty striking on these guys. This one's a little bit more gray. And they're one of our most cold-tolerant amphibians. Like spring peepers, these guys can freeze totally solid, where the salamanders have to go underground below the frost line. These guys can stay close to the surface. They can stay in the leaf litter and freeze solid. And they range all the way up north of the Arctic Circle in Canada and Alaska. So they're extremely adapted to living in a cold climate. And the name wood frog applies well here. They're definitely a forest dweller, mostly swamp forests here in the summertime. You don't see them in upland forest too much, so they tend to stick to wetland habitat. So as the ponds dry out, they tend to stay in the same sorts of areas. But up on the tundra, of course, there's no forest, but they can occupy that really cool habitat. And you can see that white lip right up above the mouth. That white stripe is pretty striking. That beautiful golden color in the eye too is pretty interesting. It's really striking. So we got something in this trap here. We got this little frog. And you recognize him by this small size, by the hint of barring cross on the back. This is a spring peeper, Pseudocris crucifer. This is our famous spring breeder that you hear go peep, 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 peep. And although I'm sure all of us have heard him, very few have actually seen what the frog looks like. And as you can see, they're not very big, just a little over an inch long. You can tell that this one is a male because of his throat pouch. You can see he's been expanding that. So when they do their peep call, they will inflate that throat pouch and then move the air back and forth between the throat pouch and their lungs. And as it goes over the vocal cords, that's when you hear that peep, 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 peep. And spring peepers are in the tree frog family. Actually, they do have sticky toe pads like other tree frogs, but we don't normally think of them as being an inhabitant of trees. They spend most of their time foraging in low vegetation for small insects in the summertime, but they don't typically venture up into trees. And they also have the longest breeding season of any of our amphibians. So some years they start as early as March, and you'll hear them as late as the end of June. But a peak calling period is probably the first third of that period. And the females will lay their eggs singly, so normally attached to a piece of plant material, and they're notoriously difficult to find. Their Latin name is Pseudocris crucifer. It refers to the cross across their back. If you look on the understory, or there's his throat pouch. You see that? You inflated it for a minute. That's what they'll do when they're calling. You can see the muscles and the legs, and also that yellow coloration that's pretty typical of spring peepers.
So, hop out of the car, get off the trail, take a look below the surface. You never know what you'll learn. Once again, back in the garage with Dave, this time for the final steps in tanning a coyote hide.
Okay, yesterday we had put the tan on it. We left it for almost 24 hours in the tan. So today we're going to take it out, we're going to rinse it, and then we're going to wash the hide and then put the leather oil on it. We're just going to put it in clean, cold water. All the water you use for this stuff, use cold water. And now I'm going to just turn it inside out. Get some of this dried up blood that's on the hair off. This will also comb out too when it's drying. The hard dry blood will come out anyways. So just some cheap shampoo, and I'm going to just put it in the water. This will help the hide. It'll clean the hair more. It'll make it even smell nicer. I'm just wringing out a lot of this water. Then we're just going to put it in the shampoo and start on one end, and we're just going to work the hair, work the hide real good through here. Make sure we get it nice and clean, and pop the ears out. We'll wash the ears off. And there, it looks pretty good now. So now we're going to wring it out. We're going to put it in a towel, and this time we're going to dry it with the first side out. We're going to soak up as much moisture as we can. Then we're going to fold the towels back over it. We're going to roll it up, It'll sit in the towel for like 15 minutes to soak up as much water as we can. And we'll just let it sit like that for 15 minutes, and then we'll take it out and put it on the stretcher. 15 minutes is up, so now we're gonna take it out. And what we're gonna do now is we're gonna turn it with the skin side out again. And I'm just gonna put it in the towel just for a minute, just to soak up some of this, some of the moisture that's on here. Soak some of this up. I'm just gonna roll it back up in the towel just to soak up some of this moisture. And we're just gonna unroll it again, and we're gonna take it right back out. For this, I usually just use the metal stretchers, kind of fold it, and you can just slide it. It'll slide right in real nice and easy, right up to the head. What I'm gonna do is just kind of straighten it, kind of get everything straightened out. Then what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna stand it on the floor here. Then I'm gonna mix some of the leather oil, mix that with about almost 2 ounces of lukewarm water and probably an ounce of the leather oil. Then what I'm gonna do, I'm just going to paint it, run it all over the coyote, run it all over the flesh side of the hide. I'm gonna get the ears. This is going to lock the hair in place. When you stretch it, it'll make the hide turn right in the leather. It's gonna preserve the hide. It should last for a very long time. We're gonna get in the tail. I'm just gonna fold this back, get it on so it goes up onto the sides. You can see right here where I want to get it way up on here also. We're gonna just go right to the tip with it. And I'm gonna get it right to the end of right to the hair on the end here. And we're gonna turn it around and do the belly. Get up on the lips, underneath the legs. And on here, I started a new way of skinning it because my wife didn't like it when I'd open up the legs all the way. So I've been leaving this part of the leg closed. Just gonna paint the whole hide. Hang it up and let it dry for about a week. I'll be stretching it. I'll take it off the stretcher. I'll be stretching it by hand, and by the time I'm done, this here will turn all white. You won't even, a lot of this you won't even see anymore. And when I hang it up, I got the stretcher. I'm gonna make sure that that's hanging on the wire, not on the nose. And so after a week, this is how it turned out. It turns out to be a really nice leather, and it's pretty soft. You could tell by just feeling it and pushing on it. In the holes, I sewed them up. You could see where I had sewed the holes. Now we're just gonna finish turning it the rest of the way out. You just pretty much hold it and pull it. You can brush it out. I'll brush it out. If it's gonna be say in your camp for a few months, 6 months or whatever, and it's starting to look a little dingy and little dust on it or something, all you have to really do is just go out, take it, turn it upside down, hold it by the base of the tail. Don't hold the tail because I don't know if it would pull off or not, but just hold it by the base of the tail. Just take it outside, give it a shake, and it's going to stand all the hair back up. And then it's just good to go hang back on the wall. Here between the two coyotes, this is a January coyote with the fur's a lot heavier and thicker. This is like an early season, like a October coyote where the fur ain't real long and thick like the winter coats. People like to have the later ones because the furs are just so much nicer on the coyotes.
Well, that's it for this week. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next week right here on Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.